Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Birch, the Health Detective, and welcome back to another Health Detective podcast. And today I want to introduce you to Heather Heynen. We just talked about that.
You did good. You did good.
Thanks, Heather. I want to introduce you to this really lovely lady. We had such a great connection when we talked a couple of weeks ago.
We did.
Heather is a mental health professional who helps people. Well, I'm going to let Heather tell you what she helps people do. But she's got, a whole raft of letters behind her name. And today we're going to have what I think will be a really interesting conversation about how we take care of ourselves. And what I really want to tap into with Heather today is what are the things that stop us from taking care of ourselves, even when we really know that's what we want to do. So Heather, welcome, and
Thank you.
The podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see you again. We did have a nice little energy flow last time we talked, so that was really nice.
So let's start. Why don't you just give the listeners a bit of background to you. You and I think we had that energy flow because we're both like outdoor addicts, and we just love, being out on our bikes and in the, in nature and walking the hills and,
absolutely
exciting things. So tell us a little bit about you, your background, and I know for me, getting to this point has been a bit of an evolution in my life, and it's just sort of flowed from one thing, and I think you've had that kind of same evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a mental health therapist, an LPCMH, so licensed professional counselor, mental health. And so I've been in private practice working as a mental health therapist it's been about 23 years now. I did start out in an elementary school as a school counselor for about 5 years and then immediately moved into private practice. That job was pretty tough. So I've been doing that forever. And then I did kind of probably about 10 years ago, sort of just wanted a little bit of a change. I still kept my private practice, still was seeing mental health clients, but I did move into, I was a co-owner in a CrossFit gym, and I did a little personal training on the side, just kind of changed it up a little bit. I needed some refreshing maybe with my career. But through that, I did that for a few years and then went back full time to my practice. But I did start to incorporate then health coaching, weight loss coaching. So I'm sort of doing this dual thing where I see mental health therapist clients, but I also have a lot of coaching clients. So that's kind of where I'm at. And then I started a podcast called Weight Loss and Wellness for Real about 3 years ago now. And through that built probably a little bit where you're at, but you sort of build this different community around you. So that's been really, really fun and exciting. And I guess in a way, kind of what led me to you too. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's how we connected. So
yeah.
And it's great. I mean, I just love being able to connect with so many people doing amazing work all around the world. And
so fun.
And then the podcast gives the opportunity to bring those people to, our audience that they wouldn't actually ever know were out.
That's right. Yep, that's exactly right. I really found it fascinating because on my podcast, I'm moving into some different things where I'm doing more interviewing now with people, but it was for a long time just me, me talking on a subject. But it was really kind of fun because you also then get a lot of feedback through social media and things like that, which is very different than working with clients one-on-one in a private practice. So yeah, it's a different world. It's fun. It's exciting.
Yeah, it is. I love it. And I just love bringing new people to the audience.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So our conversation today, these conversations tend to just go where they go.
Which is great.
But one of the things that fascinates me, and I spend a lot of time not only thinking about and writing about and reading about, and then also working with clients on, is this struggle that we have, that we want to make changes in our life. We want to, and often people think about, when they're thinking about health, often nutrition is the first thing that they think about. So and they think, well, I need to eat differently if I want to lose weight, or balance my hormones, or, overcome these, these issues I have going on. So I need to eat better. And then exercise is another one. And we both have a exercise. And then there's all the other lifestyle things. And what we see, and this is something I know that you talk about a lot, what we see is people get really motivated, and they might come and see us or talk to us, and they get really motivated, and they're like, oh, I'm so inspired, I just want to do this. They go well for a while, and then for some reason they drop off and they stop. And that reason doesn't have to be because they weren't making gains. Sometimes they'll say, oh, I wasn't losing as much weight as I wanted. And there can be a whole lot of underlying reasons for that. But it's not always the problem. Sometimes they have lost enormous amounts of weight and they are feeling better, and then they off. So I'd really love to hear what you have to say about that, what your experience is, and how can we help people deal with that?
I always think of it, and this is, just like you said, one of the biggest things that people come to me with. It's like, I was doing so great and feeling motivated for a while, and like you said, can even have these gains and it still ends. And so I have two ways that I often look at this, and one of them is a little bit brain-based. And so I always think of the words familiarity and energy. So I think of things how the brain always wants to stay in familiarity, always. So, if we have these long-standing patterns of behavior that maybe we've changed for a couple weeks, couple days, couple months, that sort of thing, but we've been doing those other behavior patterns for years and years and years, the brain's so familiar with those things. So, you can think of them as habits. The brain's just very familiar, and energy is the other word, because the brain's always trying to conserve energy. So a lot of times when I'm talking to clients, I explain that to them, like your brain, because they're like, why did I give this up? Why? They don't even know why sometimes, And so explaining to them, well, your brain's actually doing what it's supposed to do. It's conserving energy. And if it needs to conserve energy, it wants to stay in familiarity. Because if it's in familiar patterns, it does not need to expend as much energy. So that's one way that I kind of like to explain it. It takes a little bit, and you and I should talk about this, because it takes a little bit of the blame, if you will, off the person.
Yes.
With that said, I'm a big proponent that we're all responsible, for our own, but it does take some of that blame off. And that gets into the other piece so I also see it from a psychological standpoint, where people a lot of times, and the pop psychology term would be self-sabotage, where they self-sabotage. And people often will self-sabotage, usually what I see, because of a fear of failure. And so it's this really, what I call like a core negative belief of maybe not feeling worthy, it's a very human thing, not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, particularly for people who had maybe difficult childhoods, or, there's just lots of people out there who don't feel good enough. So when they start succeeding, there's a little bit of this self-sabotage that can come in. Because if I am not feeling very good about myself and I start to have success, there's always going to be this fear that I'm going to fail. And so in a way, and it can be super subconscious, I believe, even unconscious in some ways. And so I'll do things to make sure, I'm not going to fully succeed. And that fear of failure, what I do find interesting is I really believe that's more of a fear of the feeling of shame. So if we fail at something, especially if we've been doing great at something, and then all of a sudden, we just know it's going too far. I'm gonna fail, so I'm gonna self-sabotage. If we fail, we experience that feeling of shame, and that feeling or emotion of shame that we feel as humans. I just read a study on this. It's the one emotion that releases the most cortisol than any other emotion. Yeah. So,
Mm,
so shame is a hard one for us humans to experience. And so if we think about it, it's like, okay, yeah, well, maybe I can understand. I sort of have this fear of failure. But if you go deeper, I believe it's more of this fear of feeling what shame feels like, what shame feels like in our body. It's a terrible
mm,
feeling.
that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
And
What are your thoughts?
well, I mean, I know myself, you took me back to thinking about, trauma that I've had in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting because although I deal well on the surface with it,
Mm-hmm.
I have all these mechanisms in place and a habitual way of thinking that has taken me, 45 years to
Yeah.
evolve and work through, and it's not always
Mm-hmm.
successful, and I can go
You
down,
bet.
I
You
can
bet.
go down like the next person, but it's sitting there, it's underlyingly sitting there, and I've got quite good at noticing when I think
Like,
those,
like catching it.
yep, I'm like, oh,
Uh-huh. That's awesome.
okay, yeah, so I'm like, oh, why are you even thinking that?
Yeah.
Like, what's that got to do with anything? And it's all still related back to stuff that happened to me when I was in my 20s or when I was 18.
Yeah. And that
And
is what trauma does. It stays with us. Yes.
yeah, and the body image issues that came out of that, the lack of
Mm-hmm.
feeling of having any control. So when I was in that situation, there was absolutely no control.
Yep.
And so then that probably maybe leads me to being a little bit like pretty staunch about maintaining control over
Yes.
some things, but then other times I'll give my power away totally, you know?
Yeah. Like one extreme to the other.
Yeah, it's really,
Mm-hmm.
really crazy, and I can really connect with how people feel about that and how those
Mm-hmm.
thoughts then come in and sabotage your behavior. And the other thing
Well,
I think about it is also how hard it is to keep doing the right thing. So
I know.
like you're doing the right thing, and you and I've exercised our whole lives, eaten well our whole lives, and it's bloody hard work.
It
Like
is.
it
It
is hard
is.
work, and
Yeah.
people probably look at you. They say to me, "Oh, you're so lucky. It's easy for you," and you're like, "This has
Not
been
easy.
this has been like a lifetime of really hard work." And that hard work is really tiring. And sometimes you just
Mm.
want to roll it away and do that easy thing.
Oh, for sure. Do you let yourself then do that sometimes?
Um, I
Or are you
I
very
mean,
disciplined?
well, I'm pretty disciplined,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I do let myself do that sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I'm trying to think. So when I do that, I'm just trying to think of that. I try not to think of that as being negative or bad.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
I just try and think I'm just human.
Exactly. So you've learned how to avoid feeling shame in
Yeah,
those moments. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's such a huge key of and that's so much of what I do, like teaching people how do we stay out of the shame? Because the moment you're in that shame, it's I call it the shame cycle. So the
yeah,
moment you are in that shame, I promised myself I'm not going to eat cookies for a month.
yeah,
Now, I've been eating a cookie every night for years, but I promised myself I'm done. Tomorrow, no cookies. Not
yeah,
going to do it for a month. And I make it through 2 weeks, no cookies. And then all of a sudden I give in and, I eat the whole sleeve of the cookies, not just one. And so in that moment, I feel ashamed of myself, of my behavior. And now I'm in the shame cycle where that horrible extra cortisol, the body sensations that go along with feeling shame is so uncomfortable and so awful, almost to the point of pain, like physical pain. If you really think about what shame feels like, And so now what am I going to do? I mean, if I'm someone who's always used food to serve my emotions, I'm going to go back to eating even more because I need to get out of that feeling momentarily.
Yeah.
And then it always comes back. Yeah. So learning, and I hear what you're saying, you've done the thought work to
Yeah.
where you kind of have your brain trained so that you don't slip into that cycle of shame and get into that repeated pattern then of, undoing everything that you want to do. So I'm guessing, you tell me if I'm wrong, but you kind of have a misstep where maybe you don't follow through on what you want to do. But because you don't go into shame, you talk to yourself, you self-coach, and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm human. It's a misstep. Everybody's good. And so you're able to continue on the next day,
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is I have this little motto I teach my clients, never miss twice,
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so let's just pick it up and move into
Yep.
the next meal. It doesn't matter. And the other thing I think is if our physiology is good, if we are
Mm-hmm.
healthy, we
Mm-hmm.
can do
You can
these.
pick it back up. That's right.
And it's not a disaster. It's not the end of the world. But it's when we do these things. And look, I do this as well. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
God, I mean, like I have this image comes to mind. It's so embarrassing to talk about this, but
Oh, good. Tell it.
I'm going to share this. So I went to one of my friends. I think it was might have been her 90th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a lovely birthday party, and we had a lovely meal, and we all had a piece of cake. And then I got given like half the cake that was left.
Oh, yeah.
To take home. I'm like, look, I really don't need it. There's only me at home, No.
Yeah.
So I take this cake. So I start driving home, and I get this cake, and I'm driving, and I'm like,
Uh-huh. Shoving it in. Oh, I've been there.
I'm shoving this cake in my mouth until every last bit was gone. And then I
Yep.
started laughing. I'm like, oh
What
my
am I doing?
goodness. Like, that is so embarrassing. And like, what the heck?
But I think it's so great. It's so great you shared it though, because it's so many of us. It's so many of us, Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
people
know.
don't talk about that stuff, but
No,
it's
no.
many of us.
And when they come and see people like us,
Mm-hmm.
they think we got it nailed. Like they
Oh, I
think
know.
perfect. And
I know.
so they want a little bit of what we got. And it's just like, oh, like,
No, just the same.
please.
Yep, exactly. And I always love sharing that. That's why it's so great you just shared that here with your audience. It's like I love sharing that with my clients because that again helps them understand. I mean, in sharing that with each other, it's that vulnerability
Yeah.
that really actually is the antidote to shame. So
Yeah.
it is like when you can share that with another trusted human,
Mhm.
it's like it just dissipates that whole
Mm.
feeling. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing.
And I think there's a little bit of carb addiction in there. So
Yeah, we could talk about some of that. I mean, you're probably going to be able to speak more on that just within the body more than me, but oh yeah. I mean, I believe so. What do you think?
yeah, I think,
Yeah.
and I think, in all reality, you are, when you are keeping pretty good control over things and you are quite disciplined,
Yeah.
then you do, enjoy that, you enjoy that something that
Yeah.
is a treat, like as
Cookie. A
a treat.
cookie.
Yeah. Well, then that like, God, that brain lights up, and then you're like, oh, I've just got to have more. Then you're thinking,
Yep.
I might as well eat, I've eaten, like,
That's
okay,
right.
I've eaten most of this, I might as well just finish eating it.
That's so right.
And it's when you can't stop, it's when that leads into the next meal and the next meal and the next meal that you're in trouble.
Yeah, and I think that gets into too, because I do work with a lot of people with I mean true binge eating disorder, and actually we were talking about Dr. Pete when we first started
Yes.
talking, and he
Yeah.
came on and talked about this a little bit too, the addiction cycle and how that gets
Yeah.
going. And
Yeah.
that's a little bit what you're speaking to, because I think about things as well, like that whole the whole dopamine cycle as well. And so even it gets into where even the thoughts of I'm going to have a binge later or I'm going to have this food later.
Triggers
Yes,
dopamine cycle.
exactly. And so even just the anticipation of the overeat or the binge really makes us feel good is the truth.
Mm.
And it's learning how well, it's so yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's understanding that piece of it as well, that this is sort of a brain body connection to all of it
Yeah.
that drives our behavior, and learning how to interrupt those patterns in a way to kind of break that cycle, addiction, if you will.
And it's a real combination of, like the work you do, teaching people new strategies,
Mm-hmm.
but then it's also the physiology. And, you
That's
mentioned
right.
earlier about, people having some relief saying it's not me that's the problem, you know.
Right.
And one of the things that I've been working, researching a lot and educating my clients about, and I don't hear it talked about really, is the role of our neurotransmitters
Mm.
on our ability to make behavior change.
Mm-hmm.
And if our neurotransmitters are out of balance, and we've got so many of them, and they have so many different roles in our body and influences on our thoughts and our behaviors
Yes.
and our
Yes.
interpretation of our thoughts and behaviors. So if those things are out of balance because they haven't got the nutrients that they need to be able to function properly, because the mitochondria aren't
Yeah.
able to make energy properly because they don't have the right nutrients, well,
Yeah.
then we can, we can fight and fight and fight with goal setting and meditation and all these other
Right.
wonderful techniques, and they are
Right. Right. But
really wonderful, but
yes.
you can't overcome that basic physiology.
I so agree. I have a couple of online courses and I have one, and the first module is like you have to be nourished before you even start
Yeah.
the psychological work.
Yeah.
And so it's things like the water, and it's enough protein, and it's, high nutrient food, truly that word nourishing, and sleep. I mean, I think about that one too. If someone doesn't have enough sleep, it's like, how are you going to get them to break a habit or change behavior or not overeat? I mean, we don't get enough sleep, we're craving carbs and extra
Absolutely.
energy.
I know.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're just
So,
hungry all day if you
yeah,
don't sleep. And you're
exactly.
forcing yourself to try not to eat, which is just a natural
It's
response
miserable.
to the lack of sleep.
Yeah. And then I think about that too, and how that piece of it, like you just said, when you're trying so hard to make a change, but you're not you don't even have the foundation, you're not nourished in your body. You're trying so hard, and you just said it takes so much energy then to try to make that change. And then I just get into how that affects the rest of your life, but also relationally. I mean, I used to do the huge restriction, and then I do tons of binging. And all those years I was doing that, like it was really hard to have a healthy relationship, or even with my daughter. She's 17 now. We've had to have this conversation, but when she was young, it was like I had no energy to even put into relation. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It
It
affects
is.
everything.
It is. It's really important. And I think where we go wrong with, I kind of the eating program that I've designed, I call it the nutrient to energy reset. And I use energy
Oh,
instead of
awesome.
calories because
I do too.
we're so focused on calories.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you know, things that, and you're probably doing the same thing as me here, trying to educate people that protein
Yes.
isn't really calorie. Protein isn't really
Right.
calorie. So even though it's
Right.
macronutrient, it's not really supplying calories to
That's
the body
right.
that we think
That's
traditional
right.
calories. So we shouldn't really be considering our protein calories. And our calories come from the carbs and the fats that we eat.
Yep.
And that's different than the nutrients that we get. And I always use an analogy of a car. And
Mm-hmm.
so your carbs and fat are putting the petrol or the diesel into your petrol tank, or, you know,
Right.
into your fuel tank. But your car also has to have engine oil and brake oil
Oh,
and,
I love this.
you know, so it's got to have
Yeah.
those other nutrients
Mm-hmm.
and for the car to run properly. And so if you're not dealing with those nutrients, it doesn't matter how much you overflow
That's
the
right.
energy tank, you can pour that diesel out onto the you know, forecourt of the petrol station. Your car's not going to run any better or faster
Mm-hmm.
until you make sure you've got enough of the nutrients that keep the motor healthy. So,
Yeah, so true. You probably, I would guess, well, you tell me, but so I never take things away from people. I mean, when they're trying to change, how they're eating, but focus on adding things in, and it's always protein is always first. Yeah, we're gonna have you eat more, I mean, that is sort of the buy-in. And if you
so
can get
like
them to do that, yeah.
sound like sisters from another mother. That's
Yeah, I
exactly
know,
what I
right?
do. I do
Yes.
exactly the same thing. It's like, let's not worry about saying don't eat this and don't eat that.
Exactly.
Let's say it's always prioritize protein. And I'm like,
Yeah.
if you've eaten your protein and you want to have that bar of chocolate or you want to have
Yep.
that ice cream, well, you just go right ahead.
That's right. That's exactly. Yes.
But eat the protein first. Yeah.
That's yes, we are very, very similar. That's kind of funny. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I do find good results with that one. But that's also a psychological piece.
Yeah.
It's like creating this abundant mindset for the client, versus this scarcity mindset. And I mean, we know through even research studies and having that abundant mindset is really what keeps you. I'm always trying to cultivate the feeling of willingness for my clients and keep them out of defeat. Like we were talking about in the beginning with the self-sabotage, usually that comes in, they self-sabotage, they feel defeated, and that starts that whole, cycle. So keeping them willing has a lot to do with never taking things away and really creating that abundance. Like you get to add this, you get to add that. And then you and I both know what happens when you do that. They slowly stop eating the rest of the junk. It just makes it
Well, I mean, and
easier.
physiological reasons for that as well, because once the body feels nourished, once
Mm,
it's getting enough protein and getting enough nutrients, the cravings for food
yeah, so
go
true.
away. So the body's going, oh, hey, I've got enough amino acids now.
Yeah. Yeah, it just chills out.
Yeah, and it can chill out.
Mhm.
And then you're not craving like, oh, I'm always hungry. I'm looking for food, because a lot of that is driven by this need to have enough amino
You
acids.
bet. You
Yeah,
bet. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You're right. They both absolutely, I mean, they go together, that everything biologically with our bodies, as well as how we think. And because I think of things too, um, you were talking earlier about thoughts and our neurotransmitters, and that's so spot on. If we're not nourished, I know I have an episode where I talk about this, and I got some funny feedback from it because I had said in the episode, you'll end up having thoughts that aren't yours because, it is sort of like where are these thoughts coming from? But thoughts are so interesting. People think it's like their thoughts are them. They haven't learned
Yeah.
how to do you see what I'm saying? They haven't separated yet from those thoughts. So trying to teach people, you're not always your thoughts. It's not always like those thoughts are you, or maybe a better way to put it, you don't always have to hook in to your thoughts. You don't always have to buy into them. Sometimes they're just, I think of people with PTSD and intrusive thoughts. I mean, truly intrusive thoughts. You're not on purpose thinking these things. So understanding that our thoughts can be created by different neurotransmitter pathways,
Yeah.
different connections, which are affected by what we eat. Absolutely.
And it becomes like this big cycle, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so how do you encourage people to break out of those repeated thoughts? I said to you, I
Oh, yeah.
noticed, so and I'd say I probably have them so many times and I don't notice, but I do try and practice noticing. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm saying that about myself again. Oh, I'm saying that again.
Yeah.
Uh,
Perfect.
yeah.
Yeah.
How do you teach people to do that? And then do you get them to assess? Do you get them to say, is that true? Like, where did that come
Yes, I do do
from?
that. Yeah. So I do have a little method. It always starts out with teaching people to use metacognition. And that's just what you're talking about. You're doing this so beautifully. It's, we watch our thoughts, and it's watching them without judging them. So, I get a lot of people where they start watching their thoughts, and then they notice they're doing all this negative self-talk, and then they get upset that they're having all the negative self-talk. So it's like, no, just notice, no judgment. And this gets into mindfulness a little bit, where practicing being able to observe yourself without judging becomes very, very important. And once you're kind of there, it then can get into, I like to use the words, is this a helpful thought or a useful thought? So is this thought helpful? Because you know, sometimes we have thoughts that we believe are true. So if you ask, is it true? Sometimes people will say, well, yeah, that is true. I'm a terrible person because of this, this, and this. So I like to move them into, well, is that a useful thought? That you're a piece of crap? Is that a useful or helpful thought for where you're trying to go? So then trying to get them in the practice of that. And then I also have this, I would say, one of the more important parts, and that's almost to get into allowing those thoughts. So I can tell you've done great work through all of this, but I get a lot of resistance of people not being okay with the thoughts that they're thinking. And so then they're trying to resist or deny, or we can use clinical terms like suppress or repress. And then we get all that stored in the body, which eventually can turn into physical symptoms too. So teaching them, or, I guess counseling them is probably the better word, but how to allow the thoughts that then they don't want to have. So if they're working hard on their own negative self-talk, they notice they are always putting themselves down, then they want to just not think that. I'm just not going to think it, just that total denial. What happens is they come back stronger and stronger. I mean, there's
Oh,
a saying about that somewhere.
that is really that is really interesting. And I probably do quite a lot of that stuff with body image stuff. And I just
Hmm.
blank it out, don't let myself think about it. And so
Hmm.
perhaps that's why after
It keeps
45 years it's still sitting there and won't go away.
It would be an interesting experiment for you to see what is this like when I notice that come up about my body image. What is it like if I just let the thought be there and just allow it? It's a much more, when we try to push away or deny, we get tension in the body. We're in that tensed state. And so if we can learn instead, or try this other alternative method of, can I just let the thought be there? I can just allow it. Like, I don't have to believe it. I don't have to hop on. I don't have to do anything with it, but I can let it just be. We're like just in this much more neutral state within the body. And I think that can help us. I think what happens is then those thoughts show up less and less intensely, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because that brings me back. I should make a quick note actually, because there's
Yeah.
about things that came out of that. And we'll go off on another tangent.
Where's your notebook?
But that brings me back to this, positive psychology kind of movement, like we look in the mirror and we say, oh, I'm beautiful and I love myself how I am. And in the back of your head, you're going, oh,
I don't believe it.
I don't believe
Yep.
that. Yeah, that's
Yep.
nonsense,
Yeah.
And I feel like that's more harmful.
I completely agree. Yeah,
Right.
completely. And I've used the term toxic positivity.
Right. Yeah,
I can get on a soapbox about this one. I
away
feel
you
so
go.
strongly about it. Yeah, I feel so strongly about it because it's to me it is so sad when you talk to someone who's been trying these positive affirmations because they got told to do this or read a self-help book, so they've been practicing this. But what happens is, to your point, you're saying these things, it's bullshit, it is. And so that alignment within yourself is just completely off. And I think back to my elementary school days and when we had a kiddo with major behavioral issues, the teachers, the staff, everybody comes together and tries to write up a behavior plan to help this kiddo not have his behaviors or her behaviors. And inevitably the plan they'd write out things like, give him gold star, basically give him gold stars. I'll tell him how good he is, give him all the compliments, you're such a good kid, you're amazing. That kid's behavior every time would get way worse, because it was just that kid knows, I'm not good, I'm doing all these bad things. So it backfires, and it backfires for us too. I completely agree. My solve for that, because I like little practical solutions to all these things, and so my solve is teaching neutral self statements. So things like you can look in the mirror and say things like, I'm working on liking myself more, or I'm working on being okay with my stomach, or whatever it is. More neutral. Yeah.
And that does bring me back to one of my other points about this, or questions for you about this, is I really work on trying to get my clients and audience to connect with their internal body. So I want them to connect with, I call it, our body is a chemical factory.
Yeah.
I know, when you're a little bit geeky, sciencey geeky, it's sometimes, and I think, sometimes maybe, some of your experiences make you sort of step away from trying to be too emotive.
Right.
But one of the things, I'm going a very long way about this, right?
That's okay. It's good. It's good. I'm with you.
So I'm kind of evolving this. But one of the things is, I think one of the reasons I have been able to make change and sustain change is because I've learned about how remarkable our bodies are.
Yeah.
I hate sickness. I can't, I could never have been a nurse or a doctor or anything where people are sick. I just stand it. But I absolutely fell in love with the idea that the body can be well. The body wants homeostasis, that we can throw all this crap at our body for 60 or 70 years and it still keeps us alive and it does everything.
It's amazing.
It is absolutely incredible. So I try and connect my clients to the incredibleness of what's happening in their body. And then for me, one of the things which I've got more in touch with recently, has been to stop thinking about how my body looks and doing all that comparative stuff,
Right.
and think about how well my body is functioning. So
Yeah.
I'm really focusing on, oh, my brain is working really well today. Gosh, look, I managed to lift that weight in the gym today, or I paddled down that rapid today, or whatever it might be. And really with that, rather than, oh, you know, can I love myself today because the scales weighed 250 grams?
Yeah. Right. Right.
You know?
Do you think that I definitely have moved into that space. Do you think that is simply an age thing? Like as we get older? Yeah,
Possibly. Yeah,
I
yeah.
know. Well, and it's freeing, which is
It is
amazing.
great. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I would wish for everyone that they could focus more on what the amazingness that our bodies are, and its ability to function, and what our bodies can do. I'm sure you do the same thing, but I definitely try to work that in when I'm working with people and body image stuff, to turn the focus more there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think, and I talk to my clients about this a bit too, is it is the only body we've got. Like,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can hate it till the day we die,
Yeah. Nothing's changing.
hating it, but nothing
Mm.
is going to change. It is the body we've got. So
Yeah.
let's, for whatever reason we ended up with this body, that's our body.
Yeah.
So let's love it and nurture it and treat it really well and show it the respect that it
Yes.
deserves,
Yeah. That can move into a little bit on, I talk to people a lot about building a healthy relationship with themselves. And in
Mm.
a way that could be interpreted like, as part of that is building that healthy, an actual relationship. As you're talking, that's what I'm thinking about. You have an actual relationship with your body where you work to respect it, you work to trust it, like we would in any normal relationship with another human being.
Mm. Yeah, which is interesting. I think that's a really good point, because if we have that relationship, then it's not going to be based on what the scale weighs this morning. So
Right.
today I can love myself.
That's
Uh,
right.
it's
Yeah, you think about, you know uh, I mean, even sometimes people, don't maybe I mean, I work with alone people who are alone, and so often, we'll even use the template of what's the relationship like with your dog, or, your
yeah,
cat, or
yeah,
and
yeah.
I've never had anyone who can't, when you talk to them that way, who can't understand those feelings and the actions, and how you would treat someone you love, or a pet you love, or how would you care about them? How would you be compassionate? Yeah.
Well, an analogy that I use a lot when I'm public speaking or, working with clients is, particularly if I'm working with women,
Mm-hmm.
is imagine having your 9-year-old daughter get out of bed and walk into the kitchen in the morning, and you look at her and you go, oh my God, you are
Right?
so disgusting. You are the most disgusting thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, no wonder you've got no friends. No wonder nobody likes you.
Yep.
But hey, I've got the plan for you. I've got the diet for you. I've got the exercise program for you to turn you into something lovely,
Right? Yeah.
and that is what we do every morning. We get
Yeah.
up, we look in the mirror, and we go, oh my God, you are so disgusting.
Yeah.
What
Harsh.
plan are you going to do today? And you just go from plan to plan to plan, hoping one of them will work. And until you've fixed all this other underlying stuff, they
Yeah.
will work while you're rigid and in control. And then
Miserable.
and then they come to a point where they stop working.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe that speaks a little bit. Well, and I love that analogy. I mean, it really gets to the heart of how do we become more self-compassionate with ourselves, and then there's a little bit of this balance too of, because then people, I don't know if you get this, but I get lots of arguments about, well, I can't make change if I'm nice to myself. Like I have to punish myself to make change. I've always punished myself to make change. And well, one of the arguments then I always get, well, it's like, has it worked? Because you're talking to me. So it hasn't worked. It maybe worked for a short period of time, but it's not working anymore. So let's at least try something different. But that idea, and this was me for years too. So I do have a heart for this, but where you're just beating yourself up over and over, and you can get yourself to comply for a short period of time. And then it's almost like the rebel comes out, and it's like, well, screw this.
Yeah.
And that rebel piece of us is a big deal.
I think that is another like little key in the lock, actually, which I've been becoming a bit more aware of lately. Because I always joke, I hate being told what to do, and I can't even tell myself what to do, which is quite true. I have to be so careful.
Yeah.
How I talk to myself.
I'm the same way.
Isn't that interesting? And I think lots of people are. And so you possibly get the same thing I get. Just tell me what to do. Tell me what to eat.
Yes. Just give me the list. Give me the list. Yeah.
I know. And then you get, and like, this is no BS. And it's happened multiple times, is I'll get a phone call from someone who's in the supermarket. Oh, there's no cauliflower. Can I eat broccoli? Is
right.
Or I don't like this, so can I swap this for that? And what I
they
think
need permission.
What am I missing in the translation of giving? Like, you're trying to meet your clients' needs by giving them these lists and things,
right?
But what am I missing in the translation of how that is interpreted? And another one is, well, how do I cook it? And I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody listening to this, but like, my thought is, well, how the hell have you cooked your meals up till now? Like you've been cooking for 20, 30 years of your life, 40 years of your life. You must know how you're going to cook it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, I'm taking a guess, but I would think when people get into that space, it's like they want that clear-cut direction. I mean, the truth is all of us deal with decision fatigue on some level too.
Yeah.
So there's that piece of it, but then there's also the piece of, I've never been able to do this on my own, but if someone tells me, maybe that's the answer. So there's all this hope wrapped up into the lists of food or whatever. And then it's kind of like, I don't want to screw it up, or I don't want to have to make another decision. So they're calling you up, like, tell me exactly what to do. But that inability to be flexible. I mean, what you're talking about, that's a lot of black and white thinking going on, So that's just interesting, because it's sort of like, how do you help someone understand? And I like the word guidelines, because I'll give guidelines. I won't give rules. I'm sure that's you too. Yeah. Yep. I'll give guidelines. And I do try to explain the difference between rules and guidelines, because I'm trying not to get them into that rebellious state where they feel restricted. So I'll use different words, because different words create different feelings in us.
Foodless, and you eat freely from these foods, and you eat a little bit of these foods, and you eat, if you've eaten all those foods, then you can eat.
Then you can have some of that. That's right. Yes, that abundance mindset comes into play again, but flexibility too, and trying to coach someone on how to, and that we're talking all about like cognitive stuff, cognitive therapy stuff. It's like, how do you coach someone to be more flexible in their thinking, so that they're not in this rigid black and white state of mind, because that is where they will eventually rebel. It's like, but if we can stay flexible, we're
And
looser.
the other thing is, I mean, I've been doing this for, nearly 40 years. So I've
Awesome.
I've had a lot of clients over that.
Yeah.
So, I think of the number of clients I've had over the years who will come and say, so, we might upgrade their breakfast to having a higher protein breakfast.
Yeah.
And maybe not having, cereal and toast every morning or something.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of one client who used to have cheese sandwiches. She had cheese sandwiches for lunch pretty much every day for like 20.
Wow. Yeah.
No, I know. And so anyway, she did really well. She was remarkable, and she lost weight, and she absolutely looked amazing, and she got fit, and she was quite incredible. And then she came in to see me one day, and she said to me, "Oh, I'm over this." And I said, "Oh, well, tell me about it." And she said, "I'm so sick of eating salads and proteins for lunch." She said, "I'm just this, eating this every day." And I said to her, "Well, you ate cheese sandwiches every day for 20." And she's like, "No, I loved it." And so again, we're going back to brain chemical
You bet.
triggering.
Yeah, absolutely. Did she go back to the cheese sandwiches?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard.
I know, and it breaks your heart.
Yes, it does. It does, because I think if you've been in that place before, and then if you've figured a way out to freedom, I mean, with food, with your body, it's sort of like if you've done that path and you figured a way out and you are free, you just want everybody to be able to experience that. So when you work with someone who's still in that space or goes back to it literally does break your heart. I mean, it's very sad.
And the other thing I'd like to talk to you about
Sure.
is clients. So everyone kind of, and we do too, but it's just might not be so visible to people for us because we've
right.
some strategies in place.
The ups and downs, yeah.
Yeah, but everyone goes up and down. And one of the things I think, I often think because people go from one program to, I'm going to do this boot camp, I'm going to do this diet challenge, I'm going to do this or that. And, and then they come and see us and they might do really well for ages and then they vanish. Yeah. And then they've fallen, I don't like using these terms, but anyway, fallen off.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
And then they've gone somewhere else to try something else. And I wonder just how much being embarrassed and that shame comes back to that. I've often thought, well, why didn't you come back and see me, and then we could work through what's going on and try and figure out a way through the problem. But I feel that because they got so excited, really intense, and felt motivated, because we really know how to make people feel really good about
what they're doing, the changes they're going to make,
saw some results, struggled through these issues that inevitably come up, and then are too embarrassed to come back and say, because they think you're going to judge them.
I would think yes.
Whereas in actual fact, there's no judgment, because
absolutely
you know just how hard it is.
I always wonder if I know self-disclosure can be helpful, kind of like we're circling back around to when we first started talking. So self-disclosure of letting our clients know our missteps and our struggles, and I think that can be helpful because that helps with that relationship. But shame is a funny one. It's just, guilt's even different than shame. Shame is that deep, guilt is Guilt is I'm guilty for the behaviors I did, I feel guilty for the cookies I ate. Shame is I'm ashamed of who I am, my identity. So it's such a deeper level, and I think can be so powerful, um, to your point, to where someone will go somewhere else just so they don't have to experience that,
Yeah. And then they get
Yeah.
excited and motivated.
Right.
This
Somewhere
is,
else.
yeah, but without having actually really dealt with like the fundamental reason that's underlying them.
Yeah.
And, I just want to bring up, and it's a slightly change of topic, but not
Yeah, it's
really,
fine.
is that, some research was just published saying that there's 1 billion people now, 1 billion obese people in the world.
Wow.
There's 159 million obese young people in
Yeah.
the world. And this is destroying lives.
I agree.
And although there's a lot of talk about, in New Zealand, we've got a lot of talk about what's the government's role in this, and, the big food companies and the lobbyists, and, do we have a sugar tax or don't have a sugar tax, and all those things. And I know it's really boring to say, it comes back to us making our own choices. And I understand that there's a whole lot of reasons why people make poor choices. So I'm not, not deal with the complexity of that. But at the end of the day, what we've been talking about today is the fundamental basis of being able to make those choices. Because if we stop buying the crap, if we stop eating the crap, the food companies would stop producing it because
That's
they
right.
would make money.
Yep.
And we get into the cycle of eating this stuff, and then all these things that we've been talking about, our neurotransmitters aren't being nourished, our bodies aren't being nourished, we crave these foods. Granted, they're really cheap and really easily available. The little dairy down the road has Mama's lunch packs, which are $2.50 with lollies and chippies and a cookie, and there's not, a fruit roll up or something, which is probably
all sugar.
That's and so it's easy to give your kid $2.50 and tell them to stop at my mum's lunch pack for lunch.
Yep. Yeah. Sad and hard. I do feel, I hold hope. I hold some hope. I guess I also feel like what I do, what you do, this space is really important. Because I really feel it is that piece of education, of awareness. To your point, okay, governments, well, here in the US, our government's not going to do anything about this stuff. No, but it's like, right. Yeah. So to your point, I do believe it is about, could we call it grassroots? It's like, it is going to take from the people to come into awareness, and honestly, as humans, to make different decisions. It'll be interesting to see where things go, even in 10, 20 years. I was telling you, I have a daughter who's 17. So, I watch her with all this, and I've had to be very careful as well. And, just all the food stuff, she just has everything at her fingertips. She can go get a slushie here and ice cream there. It's just so easy. And so how I've approached it with her is starting very young, even. And I don't want to go down tangent with this, but I will just say one little thing. And I know you know this too, but I started feeding her broccoli and protein very young. I didn't give her sugar for the first couple of years. Like, I was that weird mom. But I will tell you, when I look at her compared to some of her friends or peers or whatever, I mean, her favorite thing to buy at the store is frozen broccoli. I mean,
Right.
it is like, and then educating her along the way as well, talking to her about what fuels her body and what's going to make her feel good in her mood with food. So just never telling her what she can or can't have.
Yeah.
Although in my home, I mean, I don't purchase a bunch of, I don't make it easily accessible,
Yeah. Yeah.
but though that's about all I can do. But that education piece of teaching our kids, and I think it is going to be teaching our kids
Mm.
because,
I remember a funny story. You reminded me of a funny
oh
story.
yeah.
My kids, when they were young, and we'd been out with a girlfriend of mine and her two children, and we were heading home.
Hmm.
My girlfriend said, "Oh, shall we get some McDonald's for dinner? Who wants
I knew
McDonald's?"
you were going to go there. Yeah.
And one of my sons went, "Oh," I said to them, "Oh, what would you guys like?" And one of my sons said, "Oh, silver beet." My friend was like, "Oh, you guys are like seriously sick."
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna, it'll take some awareness,
Yeah,
Pe-
well,
pe- people don't change. We don't change very easily as humans. Back to what we started with, that familiarity of the brain, the habits. There has to almost be a pretty big compelling reason
and also
to make change.
I think also we kind of talk about the stuff separate from ourselves. So,
Mm,
we're talking a lot in New Zealand about the obesity epidemic. We
mm.
have really poor outcomes for some of our children,
Yeah.
and you know, huge diabetes problem, type 2
Hmm.
diabetes problem, and in our kids. But we talk about it as if it's separate from ourselves, and like my
Yeah.
neighbor, she talks about the obesity problem as if it's separate from her own problem.
Right.
Oh, yes, like, oh, this is terrible. Yes, we need to be doing something about this.
Right.
But it's separate from, okay, well, what can I do about this for myself?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a old high school friend, and I interviewed her a while back, but she's such a great example of, so her son was type 1 diabetic. So what she started this whole foundation, raising money. But really she is a big proponent. She learned about low carb living. And so she learned that and went against all her doctor's advice
Yeah.
and, has this thriving son. So she started this whole online community, started this foundation. But you're just making me think she went beyond that. She really has gotten involved with politically,
Oh, yeah.
trying to make those bigger changes, in regards to guidelines with diabetes and things like that. And it's like, yep, you are absolutely right. It's like it affects all of us. We are all a part of it, but we do tend to separate ourselves from it.
Yeah, it's a problem out there that the government needs to solve, or the health authorities need to solve,
Right?
or we need to have more drugs. I'm always commenting, and I'm always making social media posts about, okay, if we had no type 2 diabetes drugs,
Hmm.
what would you do? Would
Right.
you die? Would you choose to go away and die? Or would you choose
Would you
to change your
change
diet?
how you, yep. Yeah, I
You know?
know. It's yeah, it's a tough one. We're
Uh,
trying to solve it. We're working on it.
well, I think the more people like us that are out there, our voices are being heard, we're sharing each other's voices.
Yes,
I think that really helps.
I
So,
think so too.
any final messages, anything you'd like to say? Tell us where people can find you. We'll make sure it all goes in the show notes.
Yeah, sure. Nothing else. I think that was a lovely conversation with you and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you. Yeah, people can my social media Instagram is kind of where I'm probably the most active right now, and that's at Heynen Counseling and Coaching. Heynen is spelled Heynen. But I do have a website. It's just heatherheynen.com, and you can get to everything from that. So yeah,
And you've got online courses,
I
you
do.
coach over Zoom, so you can coach anywhere in the world.
I do. Yes. That's really kind of, I suppose you do that too. That's super fun. Like meeting people all over the
Yeah.
world. I just love it. Yeah. Yeah. And then I do have my podcast. So
Oh,
people can
yeah.
come listen if they want. And that's Weight Loss and Wellness for Real. I always have to make sure I get the titles right. Yeah. So
That included in the show notes as well.
awesome.
Well, thank you for this chat, and maybe we can have another conversation sometime. It would
I
be
would love it.
wonderful. And maybe we could do a Q&A
Ooh,
one
that'd be great.
have you on for Q&A, and we can get the audience to come and attend
I
and
would,
send in all
I
their
would
questions.
love that.
Yeah, and you might be able to
Yeah.
come up with some more specific
That would
answers
be fun.
of
Yes.
some of the mental health struggles that they have.
Absolutely. That would be my wheelhouse. So that would be
Yeah,
great.
awesome. Right. You and I'll get that organized, and we'll get that booked. Thank you, Heather.
Sounds good, Susan. Thank you so much.